Welcome to Occupy Ukiah TV for January 16th, 2013. This is show number 24, and I'm in the studio today with Jamie Connerton. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you,
and
Charlie.
we're going to be discussing depleted uranium weapons a little bit later in the show. I'll give a little rundown of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about our leafleting at Walmart. We've been out there off and on, and we're going to continue to be in the next weeks to come. I'm going to also give you a Fukushima update, which we try to do on every show. Tonight we'll be focusing on the cleanup. And then we're going to be talking about depleted uranium weapons, which we've talked about that a couple times in the past. And actually, I'm going to show one of the videos that you've already seen, but it's well worth it. And for all of you who didn't see it, it's well worth seeing. So those are the three things we're going to cover tonight. We're going to try to keep it short and sweet. Let's jump right into it. Walmart. We've been out leafleting at Walmart for the past month, just about. We got out there a little before Christmas, and several of the Occupy members were out there with leaflets. I think that, I didn't get you a copy of the leaflet to put on screen. Anyway, we saw it last week. Basically, here, I've got a copy of it here. I can read a little bit to you. Basically, what we're trying to do is to make people aware of what sort of an organization Walmart is. We're not going to tell them, don't shop there, even though I feel like we shouldn't be shopping there. We just want them to know what kind of things Walmart is up to. And actually, we've had pretty good response. We've had Bill Durham and I went out, and we probably gave away in an hour on a rainy, cold day, probably 50 or more flyers, and most people are pretty happy to take the information. You just hold it out and ask them if you can give them some information about Walmart. And sometimes they say, well, is it good or bad? And we say, oh, it's just the truth. You can decide if it's good or bad. Another couple people gave out like over 100 flyers within a couple hours. So there has been a lot of openness on the part of the Walmart shoppers coming and going in and out of the store to take our leaflets. In the future, we're going to be working on some other businesses in town, McDonald's being one. One of the main gripes that we have with Walmart as an organization, it's the largest retail employer in the country. I believe in the world, but definitely in the U.S. They're the largest retailer and the largest retail employer. They have the highest number of people who qualify for public assistance and the highest number of people on public assistance of any company in America. So they are eligible for food stamps, for public housing, for Medicaid, all this wonderful stuff. Well, basically, if you think about it, that means that we as taxpayers are supplementing Walmart's low wages and low prices. That's one of the main ways that they do it. When they hire their low-price employees, their low-wage employees, they give them information on how to go to the food stamp office and get your food stamps, how to qualify for public housing. It's part of the business plan, and we object to that. We object horrendously to one of the six wealthiest people on the planet are the Walmart heirs, and they are multi-billionaires, and their employees are qualifying for food stamps. Something's not right there. So we're just trying to point out some of this of the Walmart business plan. And we're going to continue. McDonald's is a close second behind Walmart for a number of employees on public assistance. And we truly believe that if you work for a living, you should not qualify for public assistance. Plain and simple, flat out. You should be paid a living wage. You should not qualify for food stamps if you're working full-time for a living. That's all there is to it. And so we're going to keep trying to tell the truth about these businesses, encourage people not to support them. I don't shop at Walmart. I basically, when I finally decided that I didn't want to have anything to do with them, I just pretended they weren't there. When it comes to what I want to buy, I just don't consider Walmart as being there. So it's pretty easy, and I think the same way of McDonald's. Maybe I don't have a lot of money in my pocket and I want to eat. McDonald's isn't an option. I don't consider it food. I don't go there. And if you think along those lines, I think that you could help us to boycott these places and to not support them. We don't want to further their cause. Anyway, so that's what we've been doing at Walmart. I was going to read off this card, but I think I want to move on. We'll touch on this at a later date. We pretty much have talked about this for 2 or 3 shows now. Moving right along, let's move to the Fukushima topic. There's a big cleanup going on in Fukushima and the whole area. And tonight we're going to talk about the area outside of the Fukushima reactors. And cleanup in this area is going to be going on for many, many, many years. It's going to be ongoing. It's a huge problem. Let me read from this article from the New York Times titled, "In Japan, a Painfully Slow Sweep." I'm just going to read a little bit from it. Naraha, Japan, the decontamination crews at a deserted elementary school here at the forefront of what Japan says is the most ambitious radiological cleanup the world has seen, one that promised to draw on cutting-edge technology from across the globe. But much of the work at Naraha Minami Elementary School, about 12 miles away from the ravaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, tells another story. For 8 hours a day, construction workers blast buildings with water. They cut the grass, shovel dirt and foliage into big plastic bags with nowhere to go. They dot the landscape like funeral mounds. More than a year and a half since the nuclear crisis, much of Japan's post-Fukushima cleanup remains primitive, slapdash, and bereft of the cleanup methods lauded by government scientists as effective in removing harmful radioactive cesium from the environment. Local businesses that responded to a government call to research and development decontamination methods have found themselves largely left out. American and other foreign companies with proven expertise in environmental remediation invited to Japan in June to show off their technologies have similarly found little scope to participate. Recent reports in the local media of cleanup crews dumping contaminated soil and leaves into rivers have focused attention on the sloppiness of the cleanup. What's happening on the ground is a disgrace, said Masafumi Shiga, president of Shiga Toso, a refurbishing company based in Iwaki, Fukushima. The company developed a more effective and safer way to remove cesium from concrete without using water, which could repollute the environment. We've been ready to help for ages, but they say they've got their own way of cleaning up. Shigetoso's technology was tested and identified by the government scientists as fit to deploy immediately, but it has been used only at 2 small locations, including a concrete drain at the Naraha Minami School. Instead, both of the central and local governments have handed over much of the 1 trillion yen decontamination effort to Japan's largest construction companies. The politically connected companies have little radiological cleanup expertise, and critics say that they have cut corners to employ primitive, even potentially hazardous techniques. And I won't go on. The article goes on a bit more. Basically, what you're seeing is the high-tech cleanup that was supposed to be happening is not happening. And from E&E News, an article here is workers dumping radioactive waste from Fukushima into rivers. I'm just going to read some excerpted sentences from this article. And if you want to go to E&E News, You can always find Fukushima information. You can find all kinds of good information. It's a great website. It's called ENE Energy News. Cleanup crews at Fukushima Prefecture have dumped soil and leaves contaminated with radioactive fallout into rivers. Water sprayed on contaminated buildings has been allowed to drain back into the environment. And supervisors have instructed workers to ignore the rules on proper collection and disposal of the radioactive waste. From December 16th, from December 11th to 18th, 4 Asahi reporters spent 130 hours observing work at various locations in the Fukushima Prefecture. That's like a county. All 13 locations in Naraha and Tamura, workers were simply seen dumping collected soil and leaves as well as water used for cleaning. So they're just dumping this stuff. The reporters also talked to about 20 workers who said they were following the instructions of employees of the contracted companies for their subcontractors in dumping the materials. A common response of the workers was that the decontamination work would never be completed if they adhered to the strict rules. We were told to clean up only those areas around the measurement site, one worker said. And so on and on it goes. We're going to be referring back to some of this a little bit later in the show as we talk about the depleted uranium weapons. But the bottom line is that once radiation is released into the environment, it's nearly impossible to remove it from the environment. And that's why it's so important that we prevent any of this radiation from getting out. And Fukushima is like a bleeding wound. It is continually contaminating the ocean, the water table, and most likely the air. Definitely the air around Fukushima, because it's in the soil and the wind blows up the dust and it spreads it everywhere for people to breathe and to spread around via their clothing, their cars, the water, whatnot. It's so important that we work forward to prevent any accidents from happening further in this country and around the world. It's a huge project. I'm willing to take it on here in my small way, and I would hope that people will join us. So let's move on, and I want to talk with Jamie now. Do you have any comments about any of this that we just talked about?
It's clear that the Fukushima incident and its aftermath are more a continuation of Hiroshima than an isolated, all of a sudden, gee, here we've got an explosion of a power plant, and how it fits in with depleted uranium, I think we'll see as we talk and look more. One thing that I think is also clear is that while nuclear power plants are developing energy, the waste products are being used to make military weapons.
Right, exactly, and that we mentioned that on one of our, could have been the last show, is that I've been reading some information, and I can't confirm it, and I'm going to keep looking, but it looks very likely that all the secrecy surrounding Fukushima and their unwillingness to let in outside people to help with the cleanup could very possibly because they were related to nuclear weapons, a nuclear weapons program in Japan, which they're not supposed to have. You know, officially, they're not supposed to have nuclear weapons. So there is some evidence, some underground tunnels, and some other evidence that is suggesting that that could be the reason. We don't know. But anyway, there's a whole lot of secrecy. Let's move on to depleted uranium weapons, which is part of the nuclear cycle. If you'd like to give us a short introduction to what depleted uranium weapons are, how they're used, then we can go on to one of our videos.
I think first it's important to understand that the term depleted
Right.
is a highly deceptive euphemism because the uranium which is used to produce armor-piercing weaponry that the United States has used repeatedly in Iraq, Afghanistan, the Balkans, during the Gulf War, is a byproduct of the production of nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. However, it's far from depleted. It is more a term of that it's in a different form. But the half-life of this stuff is still in millions of years.
Yep.
So when the armor-piercing, very highly effective armor-piercing bullets, M16 and a lot of other weapons, are used, these breathable, fissionable oxides in a form of very fine dust are in the air, in the soil, and in the people. Our people, and their lands. The United States government really doesn't want to talk about it, and neither does anybody who's been using them for obvious reasons.
They found that these depleted uranium weapons, that the armor-piercing weapons, are the most effective for going through pretty much anything they want, right? Like concrete or
Anti-tank,
yep,
concrete. They
tank
were used
armor.
a lot in Iraq
Yep.
as tanks.
Well, we have a good video that we have shown in the past, and I think it's, I always like to watch it, so I think it's well worth watching. We're going to pull up our When the Dust Settles video, you guys. So tonight, before we go on to that, I want to mention that we've got new engineers now. Scott Morgan has been training under Alex Bergdahl, who Alex has now moved on, and we wish him happy trails, and it was awesome to have him. And now we have Scott Morgan, who's a local young man here in Ukiah who has stepped in to volunteer, and Tom Davenport also. Both of them are training in the booth and doing an awesome job for us. And it's easy to see us sitting out here on camera, and it looks all really nice and relaxed, but the work going on in the booth is pretty technical, and these guys are doing a great job. Anyway, let's go on to our video, you guys, When the Dust Settles.
Dr. Doug Rocky is a U.S. Army Health Physicist and Nuclear Medical Sciences Officer. Dr. Rocky has expertise in nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare operations, microwave radiation, emergency response, decontamination, and battlefield cleanup.
We were the super garbage men. We had to clean up the messes. We had to identify the messes.
I think
We
it's
had
a
to
good
collect all the
introduction
garbage. We had to provide the
to DU weapons. Yeah, that's the one.
Depleted uranium is a byproduct of the process used to enrich uranium to make nuclear weapons or fuel for power stations. Because of its high density and because it burns on impact, it's used in armor-piercing tank shells and bullets. The uranium is used in a dart at the core of the weapon. This is called the penetrator. Unlike nuclear weapons, uranium weapons do not cause damage by using radioactive fission. Instead, they rely on their high density and strength to pierce armor. Depleted uranium ammunition is fired by tanks, aircraft, and armored personnel carriers. When a depleted uranium penetrator hits a hard target, it burns, producing a radioactive and chemically toxic dust. Contamination can remain for years, and the decontamination measures suggested by international agencies to protect civilians are technically challenging and require money and expertise. Money and expertise are often lacking in countries recovering from conflict, and hazard awareness, monitoring and decontamination decontamination programs will compete with other priorities. The dust poses a threat to civilians, military personnel, and peacekeepers. Contaminated vehicles often remain in populated areas or are removed to scrapyards where they're broken up and sold. Environmental contamination lasts for years after the conflict. Uranium from weapons can also find its way into drinking water wells. Abandoned vehicles are exciting places for children to play in. Young children, like pregnant women, are generally more susceptible to damage from uranium exposure. Inside the body, some of the dust will be soluble and can pass into the bloodstream. Other particles will not be soluble. If inhaled, these may lodge in the lungs for a long time, emitting radiation directly into the tissue. Other particles may be transported to the lymph nodes. Soluble uranium entering the bloodstream will be excreted in urine quite quickly. But before this happens, it can travel to many parts of the body. Uranium accumulates in the bones and other organs. Uranium in the bones could irradiate the bone marrow, potentially causing leukemia. Uranium has been shown to cross the placenta and the blood-brain barrier. Because of their rapidly dividing cells and developing organs, unborn children may be more at risk than adults. At a cellular level, uranium has been shown to be genotoxic, meaning it can damage genetic material, causing mutations and increasing the risk of tumors developing. In Iraq and the former Yugoslavia, where the weapons were used, it's been suggested that increasing rates of cancers and birth defects may be linked to the use of uranium weapons. Unfortunately, there have not been any large-scale studies on civilians which could settle the issue. Other pieces of the jigsaw show that there are serious reasons for concern. Veterans from conflicts where uranium weapons were used are ill. Although other factors are likely to have played a role too, many were in situations that could have exposed them to uranium dust. Laboratory studies show that depleted uranium's chemical toxicity and radioactivity can cause disruption at the cellular level, with the potential to cause health problems. Workers and people living near a factory that made penetrators tested positive for depleted uraniums years after exposure, showing that uranium dust can be a long-lasting contaminant. Concerns about uranium weapons have been raised in the United Nations General Assembly and the European and Latin American parliaments. However, some international agencies, such as the World Health Organization, have declined to take a precautionary approach to the issue. This contrasts with the military in many countries, with soldiers now urged to take precautions and use protection in contaminated areas. Manufacturers and stockpilers of uranium weapons include the United States, the UK, France, Russia, China, and Pakistan. They argue that uranium weapons are so effective that they must be retained. However, humanitarian concerns must always come before military needs, both morally and under international humanitarian law. Uranium weapons are not currently banned by existing arms control laws. A specific treaty, similar to those for cluster munitions and landmines, may be required to explicitly ban them once and for all. A uranium weapons treaty could set a precedent for international law, covering all toxic remnants of war, reaffirming that where there is a potential risk to civilians and the environment, a precautionary approach should prevail. When there is uncertainty, the burden of proof should be on the military to prove that there is no risk, rather than civil society having to prove that a weapon is harmful. It cannot be right that armies can deploy a weapon because they believe it is useful, while leaving civilians who have no choice in the matter at risk long after the fighting is over.
right, so we're back here in the studio. Charlie Vaughn and Jamie Connerton here. So that's a video that if you've watched the show in the past, you may have seen it before. I always enjoy watching it as much as you can enjoy anything like that. It makes a very simple statement. And I think part of the outrage that I have around DU weapons is it's bad enough that we fight wars. It's bad enough that we bomb each other and kill each other and, you know, do all that. That's a nightmare. It's hell. But when it's over, it should be over. We've fought wars all through our human history. But the unfortunate thing about using DU weapons is that when the hostilities are over, the depleted uranium that is spread all through the battlefield and all through the countryside continues to kill and maim. And that is the worst thing, and it will continue to damage our future generations for thousands and thousands of years. That's hard to contemplate. So, for instance, we fought with Germany during World War II. We fought with Japan. Now, we do have some nuclear issues still with Japan, but nonetheless, when hostilities ended, we made friends with these people, and we worked with them peacefully for 60-something years now. Well, is it ever going to be possible for us to make peace with Iraq after 80% of their children are being born with mutations and whatnot? I don't know. I think it's going to. We've created enemies that will never die, so to speak. Let me pass it over to you, Jamie. I could go on this.
I'd like to say first that I'm thank you, Charlie, for inviting me. I'm here representing Veterans for Peace.
Thank you.
Specifically our local Mendocino County chapter, 116, Veterans for Peace. And our national organization, which consists of about 150 chapters nationwide, has joined the international coalition to ban uranium weapons in trying to get the United States, France, Israel, and Great Britain, the four users of depleted uranium weapons, to acknowledge their dangers and to research the effects now that it's been done, and to ban them. The United States, France, Israel, and the United Kingdom did not, for the fourth running time at the UN this fall, agree to join all the other nations of the world and the United Nations in declaring these weapons basically illegal. Once you've been using something for a long time that's really dangerous, there's a lot of reasons why you would want to cover it up, and we're trying to get the top off that.
Right.
So our organization has, the Mendocino County Veterans for Peace has generated over the last few years about 3,000 signatures nationwide, which we added to the ICBUW's petitions to the United Nations and to the United States Congress.
ICBUW is the International Coalition to Ban Uranium Weapons?
That's correct.
And those are the people that brought us that video we just watched, right?
Yes.
All right.
There's also an organization called Campaign Against Depleted Uranium, CADU, which works hand in glove with the others.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's part of the nuclear cycle. As Jamie pointed out earlier, nuclear power plants create a huge amount of waste that just sits there. And even though it's not fit for creating electricity anymore, it's incredibly highly radioactive nonetheless, and they have nowhere to put it, and nothing can be done with it. And then they discovered, oh, look at this wonderful stuff called depleted uranium. We can make all kinds of wonderful things with it. Excuse me. And so it was presented to the government. However it was done, the government decided that they would make it into weapons. They can get it darn near for free from the nuclear industry because they're happy to get rid of it. And the military is only too happy to take it off their hands. So they are dependent on each other at this point. And it's going to be hard to break that cycle, but it's really necessary. There are some metals that, should we feel we have to have armor-piercing munitions, there are some other metals. Are you familiar with what they are? Titanium, I believe?
I'm not scientifically expert enough to really talk about those issues. I've pretty well understood, to the degree that a layperson can, the DU issues.
Yeah. Well, there are some other metals that other countries use for their armor-piercing weapons. We refuse to use them because the depleted uranium is ultimate. It is amazingly effective. But how fair is it for us to continue to deform and kill future generations of our so-called enemies and our own soldiers? It's sort of an odd, sick way of throwing away our own soldiers, that after they're done serving their country, they bring home the illnesses from the battlefield, and perhaps they're just seeing them as more casualties. Just like in the old days when you had the armies rushing at each other with swords and shields, it was just a given that a high percentage of them were going to go down and die, and that was just how you did it. Well, maybe that's how the military looks at it now. It's just that so many of the soldiers are going to get contaminated with DU, and sorry about that, but that's the price of fighting war. We think it's unacceptable. We really think this needs to be changed, and I'm really glad you're working on this, Jamie, and we're going to do whatever we can to try to bring the truth out into the light, just like at Walmart. We just want people to know what the military is doing. And it's not just the war that you see on TV. It's happening every single day to these people. It's in their soil. It's in their water. I heard on the news one day about it was on actually one of the videos that I saw online, and perhaps we'll show it again, where they bombed a building with depleted uranium weapons. They wanted to destroy it and get the people out of there. Mission accomplished. And then what did they do? The U.S. Army came along and bulldozed that building into the river. And that's the river that everybody bathes in and waters their crops in and eats the fish out of, et cetera, et cetera. So rivers are our lifeblood. And they basically contaminated that river. And then everybody downstream who had nothing to do with these people they wanted to get out of this building are being contaminated and killed and deformed as a result. So it's beyond a war crime. It is a war crime.
I think it's important for the parallel to be drawn between depleted uranium munitions and Agent Orange, politically and in terms of health issues. I don't think there are too many people in the United States who aren't familiar with Agent Orange from Vietnam, and I don't know how many people know that it was also used in Korea, but it was.
Oh, I didn't know
that. The brother of a friend of mine who was in Korea died from it.
Wow.
Well, the top's pretty well been blown off Agent Orange, a little bit late, but there are numbers of people within the government and people who hear about depleted uranium and say, oh, it couldn't be that bad. Well, yeah, it is. It is that bad. And the political and health parallels are very close. Oh, no, it was Agent Orange. We had to use it in order to defoliate so that we could beat the Vietnamese. Oh, we had to pierce the armor tanks of the Iraqis. We had to do this. We had to bomb Fallujah and use this in order to get in there because that was the best way to do it. our government has got to be a lot smarter and a lot more conscientious than to poison the environment and our own people. No,
Right.
we're not.
Right.
We're not the good guys in this one.
No.
And we need to do something about it. We have been saying that we're living under the shadow of the possibility of nuclear war. We've been conducting it with these weapons. That's what we've been doing. And as far as cleanup, no, you're not going to be able to clean it up easily, only by the admission and the owning of what we've done
Right.
and the commitment to do something about it. Is it going to happen? It's the truth coming out.
Well, and as we saw in the Fukushima cleanup, here's Japan, cutting edge, high tech. They said they had the brand new methods for cleaning up, and they're not at war. They're at peace. They had a huge mess, a huge meltdown problem, and here these people are what? Hosing down buildings and letting the water soak back into the environment. How effective do you think a third world country like Afghanistan, like Iraq, like Serbia, well, I don't know if they're quite third world even, but how effective are any of these war-torn countries after we've completely, leveled the countryside and all they're trying to do is just get, food and water and make it through a day? How are they going to possibly be able to clean up their environment and get this stuff out of their soil, out of their water, off their buildings, out of their plants, animals? Once it's in the environment, like we've said many times, it doesn't go away. Uranium itself, which is what depleted uranium comes from, has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. That's the life of this planet. That's the life of our solar system. So virtually forever, depleted uranium is going to be hot and deadly. And unless we make a concerted effort to clean up these battlefields, it's going to continue killing and maiming. So anyway, let's move on to our next video. It's going to discuss some of these topics. It's going to also do the tie-in with the stored nuclear waste and how difficult it is to store it and what to do with it. This guy, Doug Rocky, is a former military man himself, and they basically had him assessing battlefields and reporting back to the government what it was going to take to clean up these battlefields after depleted uranium was used. And he sent in his reports and set up systems for cleaning up, and they basically denied his reports and said, we're not going to do it, it's not going to happen, and they suppressed the information. And he is now out of the military, and he is blowing the whistle as hard as he can, as often as he can, about the truth about this stuff. And all we need is for people to listen. And we'll talk about things that we can do to help remedy this. It's going to take a concerted effort. The world is full of these types of issues. This is one of the big ones. So let's move on to the one that we were going to show, the one that we tried to show earlier. It's called Depleted Uranium, the Ultimate Dirty Bomb. And Doug Rocky, I believe it's Doug, is the first guy you'll see talking on here.
Dr. Doug Rocky is a U.S. Army Health Physicist and Nuclear Medical Sciences Officer. Dr. Rocky has expertise in nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare operations, microwave radiation, emergency response, decontamination, and battlefield cleanup.
We were the super garbage men. We had to clean up the messes. We had to identify the messes. We had to collect all the garbage. We had to provide the on-site medical care. It's a lot. All the Iraqi equipment, a lot of U.S. equipment, contains radiological components. When that equipment was blowing up, the radiological materials were released into the environment, exposing and contaminating. And then to top it all off, we used uranium munitions, known as depleted uranium. They've been used back in 1973 by the Israelis against the Egyptians, but during Gulf War deliberately taken tons and tons, actually over 350 tons of solid radioactive materials, and dispersed it across Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. Taking our radioactive waste and throw it in somebody else's backyard. This is an aluminum model of one DU tank round. This round would be fired by an Abrams tank. If it was actually uranium rather than aluminum, it would be over 10 pounds of solid uranium. What happens, it moves extremely high velocity. The minute it leaves the bore of the gun, it catches fire. So this rod is a burning rod of uranium. It impacts tremendous forces, unbelievable forces, over this very small diameter. And it's like a blowtorch with tremendous forces that punches right through. Now, as this breaks through and goes into anything, it can be steel, concrete, sandbag bunkers, wood, or anything. Uranium itself is soft. So you have parts of the fragments of uranium breaks off as it enters and goes through. The uranium rod emits alpha, beta, and gamma radiation and X-ray radiation. The alpha particle is a 4.15 MeV particle. That's 4.15 million electron volts. Now, the intercellular voltage, the voltage that your cell operates biologically, is 10 electron volts. So when that cell is bombarded by an alpha particle at 4.5 million electron volts, it doesn't have a good day. We have all kinds of other problems. We have the beta particle and the gamma rays, the X-rays. Now, we've actually measured the ionizing radiation emissions from a DU rod within, say, 4 to 6 inches at over 300 millirems per hour. Now, that radiation is continuous. So you get a fragment of DU into your body that's emitting at over 300 millirems per hour. Or if you're holding the rod in your hand, it's over 300 millirems per hour. And if you got the fragment, then you got the alpha particle in there, which is an extremely hot particle, 4.15 MeV. And we're looking at what we measured over 10,000 counts per minute, 10,000 disintegrations per minute, 10,000 alpha particles per minute. In fact, in May of 2002, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs reported that over 160,000 troops that participated in Gulf War I, the period August of 1990 through the fall of 1991, basically October and November 1991, have been classified as disabled from anywhere from 10 to 100%. Now, my own disability didn't come about until after May of 2002. The count right now is somewhere close to 200,000. When we look at all the troops that have gone into the Persian Gulf region between August of 1990 and May of 2002, when the last formal report was written, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs formally acknowledges over 221,000 individuals are labeled as permanently disabled, and over 10,000 are deceased that had service connection disabilities. There's a big difference. There's a 60,000 increase in individuals that are disabled amongst those that served after the fall of 1991. That disability is only due to residual exposures and immunizations that were continued to be given, because there was no active combat. There was no active maneuvering. So what's happened? Well, what happened prior to Gulf War I is pre-deployment health physical assessments were not given. And at the completion of Gulf War I, post-deployment health physical assessments were not given, even though we specifically requested it. In my own case, when I came back to get released after completing special projects, I said I was exposed to these. We need to do these tests. And they refused to do them.
I've been a staff scientist at 2 nuclear weapons laboratories, 5 years at the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, where the Manhattan Project started, and 2 years at the Lawrence Livermore Lab.
Lorraine Murray is an independent scientist who specializes in radiation issues. Her degrees include BS in geology, master's degree in Near Eastern Studies, and has pursued doctoral studies in geosciences at the University of California, Davis.
For the past 5 years, my research is focused on the damaging effects of low-level radiation. The history of depleted uranium goes back to a 1943 declassified memo known as the Groves Memorandum. In this memo, depleted uranium is recommended for development as a poison gas warfare weapon. According to the United Nations Human Rights Commission, which has declared depleted uranium illegal, approximately 17 countries have purchased depleted uranium weaponry from the United States government.
In December of 1992, the director of the United States Army Environmental Policy Institute was ordered to figure out ways to reduce the toxicity of uranium munitions by Assistant Secretary of the Army Walker. In 1995, the director of AEPI told the Secretary of the Army, we can't reduce the toxicity. It's not possible. The United States Army Common Task Training states very specifically uranium contamination will make food and water unusable. And yet we use it in combat all over the place. That's why the United Nations Subcommission on Human Rights had ruled that uranium munitions were an illegal weapon, because they're indiscriminate. They can't be cleaned up, and they last for eternity.
The amount of depleted uranium used in the first Gulf War in 1991 is approximately 340 tons, and this was admitted by the U.S. government. In Yugoslavia, Lord Robertson, who was the head of NATO in 1998, admitted in the public media that the United States had used depleted uranium warheads in every missile used in that invasion. It's estimated that at least 1,000 tons of depleted uranium was used in Afghanistan in 2001, and approximately 2,400 tons were used in Iraq in 2003.
The United Nations Subcommission on Human Rights, because of the fact that uranium contamination makes food and water unusable, has a permanent effect and can't be cleaned up, and affects not only combatants but non-combatants. It's been ruled an illegal weapon. It was years ago. That's common sense.
We all know that the United States falsely accused Iraq of possessing weapons of mass destruction in 2003. In fact, the United States invaded Iraq and used weapons of mass destruction against the Iraqis. Depleted uranium has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. If we had a pound of depleted uranium now, in 4.5 billion years, there would only be half a pound left. This means that the Middle East and Central Asia and Yugoslavia are contaminated forever.
Here we are.
Okay. Alrighty, depleted uranium, the ultimate dirty bomb. I don't know if there's a whole lot more that we can add to that one. It's a great video. Yeah, I don't know, Jamie, have you got anything more that you'd like
What
to
I would like to add is that you can sit here and listen to us talk about this stuff and our opinions about it. If you'd like to educate yourselves about it, the International Coalition to Ban Depleted Uranium Munitions, ICBUW, has a website.
Very good.
www.bandepleteduranium.org. Check it out. You can, in the age of Google, you can find out anything you want about anything. The United States government is claiming that depleted uranium really does not have the health effects that a lot of really top-notch independent scientific research says that it does. We all need to make up our own minds. So I encourage people, we were talking earlier, Charlie and I, about how often when nuclear issues are brought up, there's a certain I suppose you might call it denial that we probably all have, that you almost don't want to know. Or, well, you know, maybe they must know what they're doing, they're making this stuff safe. Well, please educate yourselves. It's really important. This is the nuclear age, and if we're going to go beyond it, we're going to need to get a handle on it and be real with ourselves, and not any longer stay in denial.
Yeah, good point. If you Google depleted uranium weapons videos, lots of videos are going to come up, and you won't see them on this show because a lot of them are like an hour or two, but they will really educate you on the reality. And the question to ask yourself, one of the questions, we all pay taxes, unfortunately. We have to. You know, I believe that it's okay to support our society, but we all don't have a say in where that money goes. Well, part of our tax money goes to our government fighting wars around the planet. Okay, that's pretty bad. Maybe you feel like we should have gone into Iraq. Maybe you feel like we should be in Afghanistan. Whatever your opinion, do you feel like we should be poisoning their land forever with depleted uranium? How would you feel if we fought a battle on our soil and your village, our village Ukiah here, or Mendocino County, was a battlefield that they used depleted uranium weapons in, and now all of your food, the water coming up out of your well, the water in the river, the animals, the milk from your goats or your cows, the sandbox that your children are playing in is now suddenly contaminated with uranium dust. Very fine microdust that travels when the wind blows, and you see pollen in the air. Well, that could be uranium dust if we were part of a battlefield. How would you feel suddenly if that was your world? How do you think these people feel? They're humans just like us. They have the same desires. It's bad enough that we fight these wars. Is it fair that we use these weapons? Ask yourself. And if not, let's do something about it together. We've got to open up our eyes to the reality of the nuclear power in this country. The people involved in it are like heroin addicts. I've said it many times. They will do anything to continue with the nuclear fix. They will lie, cheat, steal, and murder to continue using nuclear energy in the way they want to. And it's time for us, who are the majority, to tell them, no, we're not supporting this any longer. If we raise our voices as the majority, there's nothing that they can do to stop us. But if we continue to sit back and say, oh, it's a crying shame, and then move on, there's nothing we can do to stop them.
Charlie, if I may, as far as what you can do or what we can do, that's a question that's always asked. Okay, this is really terrible. I educate myself. What can I do? Here's my prop of the night. This is a stack of 3,000 signatures that the Veterans for Peace Local 116 in Mendocino County originated and has circulated through the Veterans for Peace and other peace organizations in the country. This stack of signatures went no, it wasn't FedEx, it was UPS, to Washington, D.C. this fall to be added to the ICBUW's petitions to the United Nations and to the United States Congress. You can do something about this. Yep. You can put your name on this petition if you want to get in touch with VFP 116 through dupetition@gmail.com. Wow. You can sign the petition. You can get in touch with me or any of the local members of Veterans for Peace.
It's still open.
It is. It's still an open petition. And you can also, the public is invited to attend our February third weekend regional conference of Veterans for Peace North Coast locals at the Veterans Hall in Ukiah. You can find out about that. It'll be in the paper.
Great.
And
well,
maybe on this show.
Yeah, we'll bring it up on the show when it's time for that. So there are things that we can do. We're working on this. Occupy Ukiah is few in numbers. We don't have a whole lot of people who are stepping into the circle, throwing their hat in the circle, raising their hand, standing up, however you want to put it. Like I said, if we don't do something about this, there's nothing that can be done to stop people from doing what they want in this world. We are the majority. Together, we can accomplish a lot, and we can create a better world for ourselves. Of late, our General Assembly at Alex Thomas Plaza has not been happening. We've only had 2 or 3 or 4 people show up. We haven't been putting up our canopy. It's going to be an item of discussion coming up this Sunday at our direct action meeting. We really need numbers. We really want to feel like we can move forward in confidence that there's people in the public that support us. And each one of us, I feel, is represented by many behind us who aren't acting. So I really hope that one of you out there, 2 of you, 10 of you, would come and join us. And you don't have to make it a full-time job. You can show up once a week and maybe help us with a flyer, maybe come on the show, maybe help us with a demonstration, maybe do some research. Do your part. Throw in 2 cents. So the way you can contact us reliably at this time is to get to our direct action meeting at the MEC Sundays at 5:30, the Mendocino Environmental Center there on Stanley Street across from the courthouse. And we operate by consensus. We usually have a facilitator, and it's very invigorating for us when we can sit in a circle and plan our direct actions, what we're going to do in the coming days. And it's much more invigorating when we have a good group of people involved. And we really need numbers. I know that all of us are struggling to put food on the table, to pay the bills, to just make it through a day. I work full-time. I live in a very busy household. We have lots of people visiting and lots of events and whatnot, and it puts a strain on my life to do Occupy Ukiah, but I can't in good conscience not do it, because I feel like things are getting very critical in this world. I feel like unless we do something as a people to help to improve our world, there may not be much of a future for our generations, for our great-great-grandchildren. Yeah, we might be all right, and the water may be clean, and the sun may rise, and we might have organic food for another generation or so, but we've got to look at what kind of a world we are creating and setting up and leaving for future generations, and what kind of world was left to us by our past generations. We had some pretty screwed up things that were thrown into our laps, so what are we going to do about it? So I'm encouraging, if you don't join Occupy Ukiah, that's fine. Please do something. Please help us to change our world to the positive and to try to turn the tide of this destructive road that we're on. Have to put it plain and simple. Do we want to survive as a species on this planet? We're going to get selected out by nature unless we learn to live sustainably. Plain and simple. If we don't learn to live sustainably, it won't be sustained. It won't last. Plain and simple, bottom line. Let's work together.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jamie. Well, it's been a fun show, you guys. I don't know about fun, it's been enjoyable. I always like talking with good people. I always like bringing the truth to the public. That's what it's all about. You'll see things on this show you don't see in other places. Let's close the show with a Howard Zinn quote, as we generally like to do. Howard Zinn is a favorite of mine. He wrote the People's History of the United States. And this quote, I've read it before, and it's always good. Civil disobedience is not our problem. Our problem is civil obedience. Our problem is that people all over the world have obeyed the dictates of leaders, and millions have been killed because of this obedience. Our problem is that people are obedient all over the world in the face of poverty, starvation, and stupidity and war and cruelty. Our problem is that people are obedient while the jails are full of petty thieves and the grand thieves are running the country. That's our problem. Well,